okay, I've done my my time with Apocalypse World, but on Adept play, I learned a lot to like really to be less stressful, less stressed, to better, to be more attentive to the player, but also to become a better player. Actually, I play differently. I really can feel I play differently. I'm more oh, this is interesting for the story. I'm gonna do this better. Okay, I'm doing more of this instead of mm, I should keep quiet and look and see and oh no, actually better. I'm gonna confront this guy.
Right.
That's all the kind of thing. And a lot of games. I learn about a lot of games. I mean, every week you drop us dozens of games. I'm like, what? I have a list.
Yeah, I know. Everybody is commenting on how their playlist is expanding rapidly.
You see, there's some kind of excitation. Like when I came in Adept play, I was like trying to finding the right game for me, like the right game, because there's something new that I discovered too. My practice of RPG is like friends. I have my group of friends. We play to RPG, and which RPG will we play with this group of friends? Actually, that's the first time that I encounter a community where I say, "Hey, I want to play this game. Who wants to play? Who wants to play this game?"
Right.
Mm-hmm. And we play by interest for this game with new people, which is really interesting for me. And I forgot and I was trying to find the right game, like with the simplest system, the simpler mechanic. I was kind of happy with Cthulhu Dark until a few months ago, for instance, because it's very simple, it flows, we want to role play, we want to act. We still have this kind of things, like some of us still like the acting part of RPG, but RPG is now every rulebook is only written for that, not for building the story actually. And an interesting thing is I get excited to game, like to those old games that I thought was archives, like you said. Like I just read out the first edition of Mutant Chronicles because Rod got me excited with his character, and I realized that I only knew the first one because in French only the first one has been edited.
So it would be the same copy I have, more or less.
Yeah. So I have this one. I just read about Bushido.
Mm-hmm.
So I had played Bushido when I was 17 and one time, and it was very strange and like I have some kind of nostalgia. Okay, that's it. All of this is things happening because I'm interacting on the website.
Rod, did you want to?
I just wanted to note that I was reading the Patreon chat and I noticed how many Adept Play stalwarts actually only came into the Adept Play circles, came into the group when Adept Play started, as opposed to having followed over the Forge, and that kind of heartens me to think that maybe the internet is still good for something.
That's my feeling as well. I mean, much as I enjoy, at least in my display, as you'll see in the recording, I'm flanked by old comrades, like we were old labor activists, who gather together with our anecdotes and our ancient feuds within the group and all that stuff. Is still, I mean, it is really important to me for these people to kind of be appearing. And that's a big thing for me. The thing I was going to follow up on from what people are saying has a lot to do with, given a situation of play, which is a place with characters in it and some sort of circumstances that make this place more interesting or more fun. I hate that word, not interesting. Some reason why we're looking at the place with people in it right now. as opposed to having some other characters in it, or opposed to having them be somewhere else. No, we're looking at, it's like same thing as framing in any fiction. We're looking at these characters in this place, or they're different places at this point. So, given that, recognizing that in a creative state, if we're talking about the creation of any fiction, in a creative state, one is in a state where you actually don't know what is going to happen. You haven't written it yet. If you're a screenwriter, playwright, author, whatever, in that point where you are putting it together in your head, well, the characters are here, this is happening. Maybe in some cases you do have a plot-oriented thing in your mind, and you are just going to put it down. I still maintain that there is a point of commitment to what is going to happen that will twist out of your control, or what you think is your control. You think you know that this scene is supposed to be about this particular thing. You think that, and then all of a sudden you realize that your beautiful outline that you impressed your professor with, that beautiful outline, you just crumpled it up and threw it away. Because you like the characters doing this instead. Or this character that you're writing, you suddenly realize, wait, this character is way more interesting. We're going to deal, this character is the one that I'm committed to. I want this character to be involved more. And who knows what will happen to. I'm saying that there's no such thing as writing a story where you know what's going to happen. The actual work of putting it together and making it presentable in any medium can shift on you as the creator. And let's just take the easy example of one writer with one paper, one pen. So we're not talking about the key grip and the assistant director and the producer's girlfriend and all the other things that add, complications or adjustments into a plot. I don't mean that. I mean just you and this piece of paper. If we're looking at the point where I am furiously writing down what I know needs to be written down so that this thing can be read, and I know exactly, I can feel it, the right words are coming to me, and who knows, I'll go back and edit them because they were crap, but right now they're coming to me, right? And I am able to get through saying, okay, I've got this chapter. I can edit it, revise it, fix it, forever. That doesn't matter. I have what I need for that to be done. If you're in that state, it's too late for us to be looking at. That's too late. I'm interested in what it was like before that. When you thought you knew. Either you didn't know and you're trying to be intuitive while you were writing, or you think you know, but your process may produce something different. That's what I'm interested in. And I have noticed that so much of role-playing rhetoric, the hobby rhetoric, has been instead about trying to get past that point. So now we are safely in the hands of the story that can be done. Perhaps the game master is, in some constructions, the game master has their campaign. That's what the word means. The word means, in effect, we can pretend it just means playing for a long time, but in effect, to say the campaign, you are referring to somebody who knows where this is going and is going to make sure that it will go well. It will be as planned, and even if they permit little deviations and detours, or even they call it side plots, they will get us there. So that's kind of the oldest way of talking about getting story into play, is to have one, and then everybody else gets to be in it. But then there's this more subtle thing, which is not to have one, but to be making it, making it just ahead of everybody else. And so therefore you can say to yourself that you don't control the story, but you really do. And so I have been noticing that when you have mechanisms whereby the players can't really do anything important at all, then you are favoring that first mode of play, right? They can't ruin your plot. They can hit a bad guy for a few points of damage, but whether he dies or not, that's still very nicely under your control. If it looks like they've hit him too much, you can make the bad guy get away before they are killed. If they if they make a critical roll on their investigation, you can give them a piece of shit information, and it's just as good. Right? If they miss their investigation roll and they need to find out, then you just say, well, they get lucky, and give them the information somehow anyway. But the point is that you have this under control, because what they do doesn't really do anything necessarily. So I think most of us had discovered that this wasn't really what they wanted to do. Yeah, Claudio.
Yeah, so there's a very, very interesting point there about what is an outcome that I've been thinking about since, many of the conversations that happened here and in other spaces. And this kind of came out, again, while discussing, this first type versus the second type. And you can call the first type like either railroading or intuitive continuity, or a mix of the both.
I think the first is really railroady, and then the second one is more like intuitive continuity. But go on. Yeah.
And so what is an outcome, right? Because when you talk about outcomes to people, many of them think you're talking about outcomes diegetically. And this is I've never really been thinking about outcomes diegetically, but it's more of a breakthrough in like understanding how to talk to people, or how to separate like language, or how to like discern between different meanings of a word. Because when you talk about outcomes, most people think in terms of diegetic. So in the story, in the world, in the fiction, what happens, right? But I think the actual outcomes are at the table. So it depends on, it already depends on the purpose of play, whether what you're talking about is an outcome or is like color or just narration.
Right.
And so, for example, whenever people ask you something like, oh, but I did this and this and this and this happened, was it railroading or not?
Right. They did it and it happened, but did them making the roll actually make that happen and everybody had to honor it? Or
not exactly. It's that there's instances in which, for example, let's assume you're like a GM and we're in the traditional like GM player split, and you're like in a traditional game, traditional role, you have all of the authorities. And let's say you decide that players have to go to a certain place, right? And you very much force it upon them, either through putting the thing in their way or whatever, the usual like techniques, or maybe you cut a scene and you open a scene and you're in front of the King of Marmalade or whatever. That doesn't tell you whether it's you're actually removing their agency or not, because
some of those are functional techniques.
Yeah, exactly. So some of those are functional techniques, but you can't tell without the context of play.
Exactly.
So it might be that, oh, I've made you appear in front of the King of Marmalade because I have this like mission written where you have to save the princess from some monster or whatever, and I got them. I wrote all of the encounters. You're very much going to play it because I spent a lot of time on it. Or maybe this is just, it's not really an answer, but it's a question. It's like, okay, so how do you face this challenge? Or maybe in another context, maybe there's some moral questions inside of this story.
Or another way to look at it is maybe everybody has been doing things to get to the king, and the time has come to use that deterministically and say, you did.
Yeah.
You did. You're there.
Right. And exactly. And so that doesn't rob people of agency, but many people, when you talk to them about like railroading and stuff, they keep thinking about like, diegetically, and they keep thinking about diegetic choices.
Right.
This is so important to get through to people. What actually is railroading and what actually is removing agency from players.
We struggled with this a lot back in Forge discussions of this, because, and you're absolutely right, the focus on individual techniques always ruins the discussion.